Nora Callahan watched the radiator sigh in their second-floor walk-up like an exhausted animal. It had been groaning since dusk, coughing heat in bursts that never reached the corners where her children slept. Boxes towered along the hallway, labeled with shaky black marker: school, kitchen, winter, too late. The last label had been her private joke. If she didn't laugh, she might cry, and also a reminder that time had already run out on so many plans. Maya, 9, lay on the pull-out sofa reading under a blanket, lips moving silently as she sounded out a paragraph from a battered copy of Charlotte's Web. Jonah, 6, snored softly on the other cushion, one sock missing, one superhero cape knotted around his neck. The cape was supposed to make him brave. It made Nora brave to see him believe it. On the coffee table, a red envelope lay face down, final notice from the landlord. Her last paycheck from the cafe would cover groceries and the bus pass, but not the surcharge for paying late. The manager had apologized, kind about it in ways that made it worse. "We'll miss you. This isn't about you. The owner wants someone who can do doubles every weekend." She couldn't. Maya's Saturday reading group, Jonah's asthma, the long wait lists for child care. "I understand," she had said, and meant it. Understanding didn't change anything. "Mom?" Maya looked up. "You're staring at the radiator like it insulted you." "It did," Nora said. "It said it liked you better." Maya smiled, thin and bright. "That's impossible. Everyone likes Jonah best. Look at him." Jonah snorted, flopped an arm over his face, and muttered something about cereal. Nora tucked the blanket around her daughter, smoothed hair from her forehead. "We'll get through this month," she said, too confidently. She had made a discipline of sounding like certainty. "I have a plan." "What plan?" Maya asked, suspicious in the new way she had learned. Growing up made skeptics out of children, especially children who listened at doors when adults thought they were whispering. Nora hesitated, then told the truth. "The plan is to make a plan." Maya laughed softly. She put the book down and sat up. "We can help." Nora looked from Maya to Jonah. The old ache flared, divorce papers folded inside the desk drawer, legal words like support and custody, turning ordinary days into fragile bridges. Across town, her ex-husband's life appeared glossy. An apartment with elevators that never stalled, a schedule that rarely changed, child support payments that arrived sometimes and evaporated other times into reasons. She didn't like the person she became thinking about those reasons. "What do you need from me, Mom?" Maya asked. "Tomorrow," Nora said. "I need you to be on time for school and tell Mrs. Klein that we're moving. Just in case." "In case of what?" "In case we're late because the bus is late because the driver saw a cat," Nora said. "In case of everything." When the knock came at nearly 9, Nora stiffened, then relaxed when she recognized the silhouette through the peephole, the mail carrier with the long braid and the easy smile. "It didn't fit in your slot," the woman said, handing over a larger yellowed envelope with her name handwritten in blue ink on the front. "Registered. Had to bring it up." "Thank you." Nora signed, shut the door, and looked at the envelope like it might contain both fortune and flame. The return address: Whitaker and Rhodes, attorneys at law, Huron County, Ohio. She had never heard of them. She slit the edge with a key. Inside, a letter on thick paper, a photocopy of a will from a man she had not spoken to since she was 12, and directions written in a looping hand. Evan McKenna, her mother's father, the grandfather who'd lived in Ohio and sent Christmas cards that smelled like tobacco and pine, had died 3 months ago. He had left Nora the parcel situated at 257 County Road 9, including any structures and contents, with the wish, though not the requirement, that it remain in the family. There was a map. There was a telephone number for a probate hearing scheduled for the following week. Nora sat down hard. "What is it?" Maya whispered. "We might have a house," Nora said carefully. "A farmhouse. From Grandpa Evan." "Grandpa who?" "Exactly." Nora folded the letter and stared at the radiator again as if it might now cough up an answer instead of air. She had an image of Ohio. Flat land, big sky, wind that set the corn rattling like bones. She pictured an abandoned place, roof sagging, porch stooping like a tired man. She also pictured a key that might fit more than one lock in their lives. "Is it far?" Maya asked. "Yes," Nora said, "but we have a map." Maya slid off the couch, toes finding the cold floor. "Maps are good. When do we leave?" Nora's throat tightened. "We leave when we decide to believe in it." Maya nodded as if that explained everything. She tucked the letter into the front of her book and went back to reading. Jonah snored and turned over without waking. Outside, sirens waned in the city night. Inside, Nora watched their breath soften the air and let herself imagine a porch wide enough for 2 kids to sit on, and watch the sun slide down an enormous sky. They left the city in a borrowed sedan whose engine made a faithful sewing machine hum. Ms. Gail from down the hall, who collected strays and lost umbrellas and sometimes children when Nora needed 20 minutes to run an errand, had pressed the keys into her palm and said, "Take it. I don't drive winters." It was late March, which still counted as winter in Ohio, everyone said. They packed the trunk with what mattered most: clothes, the kids' books, a box of photographs, the rice cooker, a toolbox of mismatched screws, and the hammer with the red handle that had fixed more moods than shelves. They left behind furniture bought second-hand and memories that felt uneven. The landlord stood on the stoop and watched them carry the last box, his face regretful and firm. "I'll rent it by Monday," he said. Not cruel, just true. The highway widened. The city turned to warehouses, then to fields the color of tarnished coins. Maya counted hawks on telephone poles. Jonah asked every 12 minutes how much longer. 2 songs, Maya would answer, and that seemed to satisfy him, although sometimes they picked the longest songs they knew and sang them loudly enough to make the windows buzz. They crossed into Ohio at a little after noon. The sky opened. No skyscrapers, no scaffolds, just empty space. A pale blue dish turned upside down over land that looked like someone had ironed it. Nora felt her breath change. She would never have called herself brave. She had been a teenager who made lists and a young woman who forgot to put her name on them. But she had also become a mother who could muscle appliance boxes down 3 flights alone and split a bill 8 ways on a tips night and wake at 2 to find an inhaler in the dark. Courage, it turned out, was a phrase you only learned by using. Huron County began as a green sign on a post and then became a town called Huron Junction, a place with a single stoplight, a water tower, and a main street where the storefronts had big windows and the names painted in careful letters: Ruth's Diner, Thompson Hardware, Ridgeview Pharmacy, Twine and Tea, and yes, Whitaker and Rhodes, attorneys at law, above a door that needed painting. They parked outside the diner because Jonah had announced dramatically that he was perishing. Ruth, it turned out, was a tall woman with a braid like a rope and a smile like a porch light. "You must be from out of town," she said, eyes taking in their license plates and their eyes. "We are," Nora said cautiously. "Hungry?" Ruth asked in the tone of someone who considered hunger a problem with a single sensible solution. "Sit anywhere." She brought grilled cheese that melted like a promise, soup that tasted like the definition of February, and pie that was 61% butter by volume. While they ate, a man with silver hair and a wind-chapped face came in and tipped his cap. "Afternoon, Ruth." "Afternoon, Tom. This is Nora and her too." "Welcome," he said, as if the word had weight, like a doorstop against a gust. "I'm Tom Thompson. Hardware across the way. If you need a snow shovel in April, I'm your man." "Do people need snow shovels in April?" Maya asked, somewhere between skeptical and excited. "In this county," Tom said, "we respect April." They laughed. The laughter turned a little of the strangeness into something else. At 2, Nora climbed the stairs above the law office with both kids, because she could not imagine leaving them anywhere, and because leaving them had been the beginning of too many troubles in other rooms. The reception area smelled like books and lemon oil. A framed photograph showed a younger man with a wide forehead and kind eyes standing in front of a brick building. Underneath, Evan McKenna, 1949. Her grandfather looked like a stranger who might help you pull a car out of a ditch. A woman in a navy sweater stood and extended a hand. "I'm Claire Whitaker," she said. "Nora, you look like your mother." Nora startled. "You knew her?" "Once," Claire said simply. "We'll talk. Come in, bring your team." Jonah sat on the carpet and drove 2 Matchbox cars in circles while Claire explained the process. The farmhouse had been legally Nora's since the court had stamped the documents last week. Back taxes were modest. No mortgage remained. The property ran to 11 acres, mostly brush, with a house, a barn, a caved-in shed, and a line of apple trees that, according to Claire's notes, still produce. Nora tried to keep her face from moving too much while she listened. A house, apples, a barn. Words like Lego bricks that might snap together into something stable. "Your grandfather left a note," Claire added, opening a folder and sliding a single handwritten page across. "Nora," it began, "you always laughed with your whole face. If this finds you, it means I didn't get to tell you anything myself, which is my life's pattern. Quiet when speaking would have helped. The farm is tired. The roof sags. But there are bones to it. There is one more thing you should know, but I can't say it here. You'll find my ledger in the cellar, behind the blue mason jars." Nora felt a small, sharp click of something in her chest, fear mixed with curiosity, and a warmth she hadn't expected. "He remembered me. He remembered you," Claire said. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" "We're going to the house," Nora said, surprising herself. "If the roof sags, we'll hold it up." Claire smiled. "I have a number of a man who can check the chimney tomorrow. And if the furnace doesn't turn over, Ruth has a guest room. She keeps it for travelers and friends, which are sometimes the same thing," Nora said. "Exactly," Claire said. They drove the last 6 miles with the map folded on Maya's lap. County Road 9 ran like a seam through fields stitched with fence rows and ditches full of melted snow. The farmhouse appeared around a bend. 2 stories, white paint peeled down to the boards, a porch tilted in contemplation, windows filmed but unbroken. The front door stuck the way old doors do, like a stubborn memory, and then opened all at once, letting them into a dim hallway that smelled of dust, dry wood, and something else. Apples, faint as a turned page. Maya stood in the front room and turned slowly, taking in the carved banister, the square of sun on the floor, the fireplace crusted with ash. "I love this," she said, and Nora realized with a start that she did too. Not the house as it was, but the feeling it gave her, a thing you could work on every day and see the changes. "Can we camp here?" Jonah asked. "We can," Nora said. "We'll set up near the stove. We'll call Ms. Whitaker's chimney man. We'll see what the house says back to us." That night, they slept under 3 blankets on the living room floor, the kids a warm knot against her side, the farmhouse settling around them with creaks that sounded almost like breathing. Nora lay awake in the dark, listening for trouble and hearing only the wind in the apple trees and the clock they hadn't wound ticking once and going quiet. She thought of the ledger behind the mason jars. She thought of work, of floors and walls and lists she knew how to make. She thought, for the first time in months, of staying. By the end of the first week, they had learned the rhythms of Applewood Farm. Maya named it, because the official documents called it Parcel 17A, which sounded like an argument with a committee. Morning light slanted through the east windows and found the places the paint had blistered. Afternoon sun warmed the porch enough for lunch if you wore a sweater and believed in April like Tom did. Night still required wool socks and a sense of humor. Nora made lists on a yellow legal pad she found in a kitchen drawer. Heat topped every page. The chimney man, Mr. Potter, arrived on Tuesday, peered into the flue, and nodded in a way that combined reassurance with caution. "It's safe if you respect it," he said, brushing soot from his sleeve. He replaced a length of pipe, taught Nora how to stack the wood, and drank Ruth's coffee at the kitchen table while telling stories about families he'd known in the county for 5 generations. "You're not the first to move back to what was left behind," he said. "You won't be the last." Tom delivered a space heater, a toolbox, and a coil of braided rope. "For hauling," he said, "or for when you need to feel handy. Rope's good for that." Ruth showed up with a casserole heavy enough to qualify as a doorstop and a jar of apple butter that made Jonah declare that Ohio was better than television. "I keep a spare room over the diner," she told Nora. "If the house misbehaves at night, you call me." No pride allowed in the first month. "No pride allowed," Nora repeated, making a rule out of it. Maya learned the path to the school bus. 3 fence posts, a wooden gate that squealed like a rusty violin, a dip in the road where rain gathered. She grew quiet strong in that first month, absorbing a new teacher's voice, a new cafeteria's rules, the smell of someone else's crayons. She came home with stories about a girl named Ellie, whose family had goats that wore sweaters when it snowed, and about a librarian who made the rule that you could check out more books if you promised to read them to your little brother. "I promised," Maya said, eyes fierce. Jonah discovered that Barnes made excellent echo chambers for superhero declarations. He made friends with a crow who sat on the peak of the roof and judged them all. He learned to stack kindling in careful towers and to blow softly into a nest of tinder until the spark caught. "Fire listens if you ask nicely," he told Mr. Potter. Together, they tackled projects that changed the way rooms felt under their feet. They ripped up the stained carpet in the front room to reveal a hardwood floor whose scars told stories. A circle worn where someone had stood and rocked a baby. A dark streak near the stove where someone had dropped coffee every morning in the same place. They cleaned the pantry and discovered an army of blue mason jars, their glass thick and wavy, their metal lids blued with age. Behind them, after a long afternoon of shifting jars and dusting shelves, Nora found a narrow wooden door she had not noticed, set low to the floor with a latch that stuck. She stared a moment, flush rising in her chest. "Ledger," Maya said softly. "Ledger," Nora agreed. They waited until after dinner, when the shadows in the kitchen had thickened and the stove had settled. Nora slid the latch, pulled the low door open, and lifted out a shallow wooden box. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a book bound in cracked brown leather. The pages smelled like old paper and apples, and the faint metallic tang of coins. On the first page, in a hand that slanted with the same stubborn assurance as the will, her grandfather had written, "Applewood Ledger, begun, April 1962. If found, read slowly." Nora read slowly. The ledger was part diary, part account book, part confession. Evan McKenna had bought the farm from a man who wanted to retire to Florida and fish. He wrote about droughts and late frosts, about a mare that foaled in a thunderstorm and a son, Nora's uncle, who left for the West and then for good. He wrote about a daughter, Nora's mother, who fled to Chicago with a suitcase and a fierce chin. He wrote about apologies he did not make and letters he did not send. And then, 20 pages in, the ledger changed. June 7th, 1975. They came before dawn, two men with government manners, polite as bankers. They asked about the bomb shelter my brother and I dug in 62. Everyone dug then. Fear is a good shovel. I told them it caved in. It did, mostly. One man, Rhodes, said there would be experiments conducted at the old airfield. He asked if anyone might bury things out here. I said no, because I didn't know any better yet. They left a map they said was wrong on purpose. I kept it anyway. September 2nd, 1977. Found the corner where the creek bends twice. Digging turned up a metal box. Not government. Older. Wrapped in canvas. Sealed with tar. Inside, coins, papers, bearer bonds with numbers like telephone poles. Not mine. Not anyone's who would admit it. I put them back. I couldn't put them back. December 12th, 1991. The market goes up. The market goes down. The bonds do not care about my barn roof, but the barn roof cares about me. I don't trust banks and I don't trust men in suits. I trust dirt. Dirt keeps secrets. I made a list. If someone finds this after I'm gone, they will know I didn't spend it because I didn't know how to spend it without hurting something I couldn't fix. The county needs a library wing. The co-op needs a loan. Children need shoes. Money makes men foolish. Maybe a girl, now or later, will be braver than I am. There were sketches, maps of the orchard, an X beneath an old winesap tree, notes about depths measured with a shovel handle cut to 3 feet. There were arithmetic columns that made Maya squint and whisper, "Is that 27 million?" Nora said, voice barely a breath. "If the bonds mean anything now, if they can be redeemed. If," she said the word like a fence post in soft ground. They didn't sleep much that night. Nora turned and turned the information like a coin in her palm, feeling its ridged edges. Wealth had never been a word in her mouth. It felt like a foreign language she could read, but not speak. She thought of the house. She thought of the county. She thought of a man who had buried a fortune because he didn't trust himself to use it. She thought of her children asleep upstairs in a room that would need new windows before winter. In the morning, she did what she had learned to do. She made a list. Confirm whether old bearer bonds could still be redeemed. Do not dig anything without legal advice. Breathe. Do not tell the internet. She took the ledger to Claire Whitaker, whose eyes sharpened like a bird dog's when she saw it. "I know the roads your grandfather mentions," Claire said. "My partner's father. He worked procurement in the 70s and retired before I ever practiced. This is complicated." "I figured," Nora said. "I need complicated to pay the back taxes by October, and to keep the roof from falling on my children. We'll proceed carefully," Claire said, and quietly. "May I have a day to make calls?" "Yes," Nora said, allowing herself to be the kind of person who let someone else handle a problem for 24 hours. She walked back to the diner and ate eggs that arrived in a pool of butter. Ruth listened with her head tilted and her eyes on Nora's hands. "You look like someone who's holding a hatful of bees," Ruth said. "That's exactly how I feel," Nora said. She told Ruth only that the ledger suggested there might be something buried on the property that would require experts and patience. It felt right to guard the specifics. It felt right to tell Ruth something, because secrets left alone in chest cavities ate their way out. "If it is what you think," Ruth said, choosing her words, "it could be a miracle. We're careful with miracles here. We don't waste them on fireworks." Nora nodded. "I want to do this right." Ruth's hand landed soft and solid on Nora's wrist. "Then you will." 2 days later, Claire arrived with a man in a dark coat and a cautious expression. "This is Daniel Alvarez," she said, "retired bank examiner. He consults on cases where old paper meets new law. He's discreet." Alvarez inspected the ledger, the maps, the notations. His fingertip traced the numbers with something like affection. "People forget how wild finance was in the 70s, he said. "Bearer bonds were passports for money that didn't want a name. They're mostly illegal now. The ones that remain require careful handling and a blessing from 3 different agencies that do not enjoy blessing anything." "Can they be redeemed?" Nora asked. "Some can," Alvarez said. "If they're not canceled, if they're not stolen, if they're not counterfeit, if chain of custody can be established to the satisfaction of a court, if," he smiled a little at her face. "It's a lot of ifs. But if your grandfather documented what he found, and if we can approach the issuers with counsel, it's not impossible. It won't be television. It'll be months, maybe years. I have time." Nora lied, then corrected herself. "I don't, but we'll make some." They decided to excavate one location, the wine sap tree on the eastern edge, under supervision, with photographs, measurement, and a sheriff's deputy present, to satisfy whoever later asked questions. Claire made the calls. The deputy, a woman named Parker with a steady gaze, arrived on Saturday morning with a thermos and a camera. Ruth stood at the fence line, arms folded, not to meddle but to witness. Tom brought shovels and a metal detector he swore worked better than it looked. "Ready?" Claire asked. Nora looked at Maya and Jonah, who stood hand in hand and as solemn as acolytes. "Ready," Nora said. They dug where the ledger marked an X. 2 shovel lengths from the trunk where the roots braided, 3 feet down. The soil was stubborn with clay. The metal detector ticked faintly, then chimed. Tom knelt and brushed earth aside with his hands, careful as if the ground might bruise. The shovel hit something dull with a thunk that ran up Nora's bones like shock. They cleared more soil. A corner emerged. Metal, rust bit, wrapped once in what had been canvas and had become merely stubborn. The box was the size of a bread loaf, heavier than it looked. With a grunt, Tom lifted it into the light and set it gently on a folded towel. Deputy Parker photographed the box. Claire logged the time, the coordinates, the witnesses. Alvarez ran a gloved finger along the seam. "We'll open it at the bank," he said, "for chain of custody." His gaze met Nora's. "This is the moment when most stories go sideways. Don't let it." "I won't," Nora said. "I'm not interested in sideways." At the bank, under fluorescent calm and a ceiling camera, they pried the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth too, lay bundles of paper held with twine, stamped with dates and numbers. The top layer revealed bearer bonds from corporate issues long retired, but not necessarily canceled, their denominations absurd to hold, $50,000, $100,000. Nestled among them were double eagles, gleaming $20 gold coins that caught the light like a living thing. At the bottom, a folded letter with Evan's handwriting. "If you're here, it means you're braver than I was. This is yours in the sense that the land is yours, and I didn't know who else to trust. If it turns out to be more trouble than it's worth, rebury it and plant a tree. But if you can make something grow from this besides greed, do it. Start with the library. The rest will tell you what it wants." Nora exhaled a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh. Maya stood very straight. Jonah whispered, "Treasure," and then, "Library?" as if the second word impressed him more. They closed the box, sealed it, logged it. Alvarez made 3 phone calls that sounded like chess. Claire took Nora's hands in the parking lot and spoke in a voice low enough to belong to prayer. "This is real enough to be hard," she said. "We will do it in steps. We will be patient." "I can do steps," Nora said, and meant it. Word did not exactly get out, but the shape of it did, as shapes do in small towns. People knew something happened at Applewood, and that Claire had been involved, and that Alvarez had a way of arriving quietly in places where nothing exciting was supposed to happen. Ruth and Tom knew more, but they were vaults. Others guessed, and then reshaped their guesses to fit their own hopes. Trouble came from the places predictable and not. A letter from Nora's ex arrived via his attorney, inquiring whether any assets recently acquired should be considered in recalculating support and custody. He had not called to ask how the kids were. Claire drafted a response that was a masterwork of polite refusal. There were no liquid assets, no income to report, nothing realized or realized soon. "You owe nothing you did not owe yesterday," she said gently. "We won't negotiate with hypotheticals." The bank required a security plan. The excavated box would remain in a safe deposit vault. The orchard would be left alone until the first tranche could be authenticated. Alvarez coordinated with an issuing corporation's archivist, a woman who spoke in dates and reference numbers, and who asked intelligent, difficult questions. "Chain of custody," she said repeatedly, like a beat in a song. A state agency wrote to ask whether any World War II surplus or hazardous materials might be present on the property. "No," Deputy Parker replied, and attached photographs of the excavation and of Jonah eating a peanut butter sandwich at the fence line. "We unearthed lunch and history. No ordnance." Nora's funds ran thinner than paper. Work came where it could. Part-time mornings at the diner, washing dishes before the breakfast rush. Afternoons shelving books at the library, after Ruth introduced her to the head librarian, Ms. Green, a woman who wore cardigans like battle flags and knew every child by name and reading level. "You organize as if everything depends on the order of things," Ms. Green said approvingly. "It often does." Maya's class took a field trip to the orchard to see real work, as Ellie's father put it. The children picked up fallen branches and asked questions with the kind of sincerity that made Nora press her tongue to the roof of her mouth to keep from crying. Jonah discovered a passion for rakes. He raked with the gravity of a monk, copying scripture. Nora learned 1,000 practical skills, each expensive in time and cheap in money. How to stop a leak at the valve before it became a geyser. How to lay down a bead of caulk cleanly. How to make a dinner from onions, eggs, and faith. She learned that community did not mean free help. It meant fair help. You offered what you had, and others did too. And together the ledgers balanced with human arithmetic that did not always involve cash. At night, when the kids slept, she and Maya read the ledger again. They made a list on a fresh page. Library wing, Grandpa's idea, school lunch fund, Maya's fierce addition, emergency wood stove program, Tom's suggestion, no one freezes on my road, after-school reading room at the library. Ms. Green's eyes brightened. Roof fund for Applewood, Nora's practical heart. "It's not ours yet," Maya said, so serious her cheeks flushed. "But we should be ready." "We should," Nora agreed. "We'll move like it might arrive and live as if it won't." Alvarez returned with good news spoken cautiously. An initial set of bonds looked authentic and uncancelled. The issuing company was willing to proceed with verification under court oversight. It would take months. It would cost fees. It would require an accountant who understood how not to drown a person in taxes. "I know someone," he said. "Her name is Priya Desai. She grew up poor, which helps." Priya arrived in sneakers and a blazer with elbow patches. She placed a neat notebook on the table and said, "My job is to keep you from either giving everything away or getting eaten alive. We'll establish a trust. Multiple. One for the property, one for community allocations, one for the kids' education." She drew boxes and arrows. "We will avoid a savior complex. We will avoid the attention economy. We will answer only what must be answered. We will pay ourselves a salary from the trust that is reasonable to the point of boring. Boring keeps you out of the news." "I like boring," Nora said, surprised to find she meant it. Priya introduced Nora to the idea of a community land trust. You keep the land in perpetuity. You lease plots affordably. You build small homes for teachers, for nurses, for every person the town can't function without. You're not a landlord. You're a steward. This is different. "I don't know anything about being a steward," Nora said. "You know how to repair things," Priya said. "It's the same impulse." Claire helped petition the court to appoint Nora as the trustee of Evans' estate, with specific community-oriented powers. The hearing took place on a gray morning in a county courtroom, with varnished benches, and a judge who had taught Sunday school to half of the lawyers wearing suits. Claire argued cleanly. Nora spoke briefly about her grandfather's ledger, the note about the library, the orchard she was learning to prune. The judge inclined his head. "We're not in the habit of blessing miracles here," he said, "but we'll permit careful stewardship." Outside, Ruth hugged Nora with both arms. in a way that communicated congratulations and also remember to eat. Tom clapped her shoulder. Deputy Parker said simply, "You'll do right by it," and that blessing felt like a stake in the ground. Maya told her class. The children argued passionately about whether the library should get comics as well as science books. Ms. Teta Green convened a youth advisory board that met on Tuesdays to discuss the reading room. Jonah joined in because snacks were promised, but stayed because stacking books felt like building walls that hugged people. Spring thinned into summer. The orchard leafed and bloomed, then set small green apples like coins. The first tranche of bonds cleared authentication and redemption, less than the numbers on the paper promised, because interest had stopped 1 year and fees had started another, but more than Nora had ever imagined seeing. After taxes and costs, the trust received an initial deposit that was both humbling and dizzying. Alvarez smiled more easily for the first time. Priya insisted on champagne in paper cups, and then put away the bottle with the calm of a person who knows that celebrations are punctuation, not thesis. They began by funding the library wing, quietly, as an anonymous donor at first. The architect, a woman from 2 counties over with a braid even more unruly than Ruth's, designed a sunlit room with windows that faced the orchard and shelves low enough for small hands. "Ms." Green cried when she saw the plans, and then pretended she had dust in her eye for a week. They set up the after-school reading room with pillows, lamps, a rug that didn't show jelly, and a sign shaped like an open book. "Reading builds roofs you can live under." Maya and Ellie staffed it twice a week with Ms. Green supervising, reading to first graders who sprawled like starfish, and asked important questions about Dragon's union rights. They established the Emergency Woodstove Fund, with Tom coordinating installations and Mr. Potter inspecting chimneys without lecturing unless lecturing became essential. Deputy Parker oversaw a list of addresses where the porch lights had flickered in winter. No one advertised. People just woke up warmer. The land trust paperwork crawled through committees like a careful animal. Priya never let Nora rush. "If it outlives you," she said, "then it's worth the patience." They identified 3 acres at the edge of the property to dedicate to small, affordable homes that teachers and nurses could lease at a price that didn't insult their paychecks. A local carpenter named Jude, a quiet man who laughed silently and built chairs that made you sit up straight, volunteered to teach teenagers framing in an after-school carpentry class. "We need framers," he said, shrugging as if he had stated a law of physics. The house itself received a roof that didn't leak, windows that shut without swearing, and a porch that insisted you sit for 5 minutes before making any decision. Nora took a part-time job at the library, kept the morning dish shift at the diner because it kept her grounded and in touch with news that arrived in pancakes, and worked afternoons on the farm's books. She paid herself a salary from the trust modest enough that Ruth joked she was the only person who could inherit something and still buy the on-sale brand of coffee without thinking about it. "It's a knack," Nora said. The remaining boxes in the orchard remained in the ground. Nora wasn't in a hurry to be rich. She was in a hurry to become someone who could be trusted with wealth. They worked one cache at a time, each step documented, each step done with witnesses and notes and photographs that made accountants happy. The number $27 million, shocking, absurd, became a horizon rather than a windfall, something to work toward responsibly rather than spend recklessly. 3 years later, on a crisp October morning, when the apple trees hung heavy with fruit, Nora stood on the porch watching Maya teach a group of second graders how to identify ripe apples by their color and the hollow sound they made when tapped. Jonah, now 9 and serious about his role as assistant orchard manager, demonstrated the proper technique for picking without bruising the fruit. The library wing had opened the previous spring with a ribbon-cutting ceremony that featured Ms. Green crying happy tears, and half the county bringing casseroles. The reading room buzzed with activity every afternoon. Children sprawled on the rug with picture books. Teenagers hunched over homework at the study tables. Adults attending the monthly book club that Ruth had started with characteristic determination. The first 2 houses on the land trust property were nearly complete. Sarah, the new 3rd-grade teacher, would move into one in November. Dr. Martinez, the physician's assistant at the county clinic, had already put a deposit on the second. Both homes featured deep porches, energy-efficient heating, and gardens sized for someone who worked long hours but still wanted tomatoes. Deputy Parker stopped by most Saturdays, ostensibly to check on security, but really to drink Ruth's coffee and report on how the emergency wood stove program was working. "No cold houses this winter," she'd said the week before. Tom's got a waiting list of volunteers who want to help with installations. The legal complexities had finally resolved themselves into a routine of quarterly reports and annual audits that Priya managed with the same calm competence she brought to everything. The trust had grown rather than diminished, its investments conservative, and its distribution steady. Boring money, Priya called it approvingly. The kind that lets you sleep at night. Nora had learned to sleep at night. Not just because of financial security, but because of the way the farmhouse had settled into itself under their care. The roof held. The windows opened without protest. The porch steps no longer sagged under weight. At night, she could hear the sounds that belonged. Wind in the apple trees, the occasional hoot of an owl, the steady breathing of her children in the room above. Maya bounded up the porch steps, cheeks flushed with cold and pride. Mrs. Chen says we picked enough apples for 3 pies and a whole batch of applesauce for the food pantry, she announced. And Ellie's mom wants to know if we can teach the apple-picking class again next year. We can, Nora said, ruffling her daughter's hair. As long as the trees are willing. Jonah appeared with a basket nearly too heavy for his arms, grinning with the satisfaction of useful work. Mom, look how many. And I only dropped 2. And they weren't good ones anyway. That evening, after the school group had departed with their bags of apples and promises to return, Nora sat at the kitchen table with Evan's ledger. She had started making her own entries, documenting not just financial transactions, but the life growing around them. October 15th. Library reading room hosted 47 children this week. Ms. Green says the circulation has doubled since the expansion. October 20th. First snow. All emergency wood stoves working perfectly. Tom reports 6 new volunteers for the installation crew. October 25th. Maya's class performed their apple harvest song at the school concert. Jonah forgot the words but hummed along with conviction. She paused, pen hovering over the page, then wrote, October 30th. 3 years since we arrived with everything we owned in borrowed boxes. The children have roots here now, real ones that go deep. Maya talks about college, but also about coming back to teach. Jonah wants to be either a superhero or a farmer, depending on the day. I want to be the kind of steward Grandpa Evan would recognize, careful with what's been entrusted, generous with what can be shared, grateful for the daily miracle of enough. The orchard produced 847 pounds of apples this year. We kept what we needed, shared what we could, and stored the rest for the long winter ahead. This seems like the right proportion for most things. She closed the ledger and looked around the kitchen, at the mason jars filled with applesauce, at the children's art taped to the refrigerator, at the window that framed a view of the orchard where lights twinkled in the little houses where neighbors lived. Outside, the first stars appeared in a sky that stretched wider than any horizon she had known in the city. Inside, the farmhouse held them all, past and present, memory and possibility, the inheritance of land and the inheritance of love. Maya appeared in her pajamas, padding barefoot across the warm floor. Mom, are you writing in Grandpa's book again? Our book now, Nora corrected gently. Yours and Jonah's and mine. And someday, maybe someone else's who needs a place to begin again. Maya nodded seriously, understanding in the way children do when truth settles into their bones. It's a good book, she said. It's a good book, Nora agreed. And we're still writing it. Through the window, the apple trees stood guard over their small corner of the world, their branches bare now, but already preparing for spring. In the distance, warm light spilled from windows where people they had come to love were settling into their own evening routines. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke and the promise of snow, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Nora felt the deep contentment that comes from being exactly where you belong. The story of Applewood Farm was still being written, one careful day at a time. And that, Nora thought as she turned off the kitchen light and followed her daughter upstairs, was exactly as it should be.